Hello everybody and welcome. This is Adrian. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are here today with a review of the first Hearts of Iron IV expansion titled Together for Victory, which focuses primarily on the British Commonwealth and on expanding the interactions between the United Kingdom and its subjects. Let's begin. I've had about 10 hours with the expansion, having recorded a Let's Play with a fascist British Raj and messing around with Australia and South Africa. While this might not seem like a lot of time to spend with the expansion, after the first few hours, Together for Victory feels and looks like that old ex-girlfriend that still tries to hang out. To you, she looks nice on the outside, but she has some problems and qualms on the inside. So, the expansion has several advertised and noted features, and we will go ahead and break these down now. The arguably largest and most important feature is the addition of new national focus trees and events for Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the Raj, and South Africa. The focus trees themselves are large, well-balanced, expansive, and add some flavor to the game, and doubly so when played in multiplayer. The trees range from developing a country's infrastructure, dockyards, and civilian and military factories, to sending Hindustani Indian paratroopers to Italy, or training Indian Gurkhas for British service. There are plenty of technological discounts to go around, but for countries like India, which start with no naval tech but only get a couple naval tech reductions, the discounts don't go very far for the most part. Don't get me wrong, the focus trees are nice, but at the end of the day, when looked at in the big picture, they are of limited utility. World War II wasn't won by India, Australia, New Zealand, or Canada alone, and though the focus trees give the player something to do and work toward when playing one of these Commonwealth nations, you still get the impression you don't have much of an effect on the overall outcome of the war, let alone on your own nation's destiny and historical path. And independent India is still surrounded by the USSR, Japan, China, and Dutch and British Asia, and unless you're able to hocus-pocus your way to the British Isles in the hope of world domination, being independent and fighting the Axis allies or Comintern feels like a grind more than a fun challenge. An independent Australia doesn't want to sit at peace for a game that focuses primarily on war, and an independent South Africa that wants the Belgian Congo and British East Africa still needs to dolphin its way to London to truly achieve victory. Whether these considerations were overlooked or noticed and simply unacknowledged, being independent, changing ideology, or staying loyal to the British seem like lackluster additions for the price premium that you pay. If there was some way to be independent and conquer all you want without needing to fight the Allies in London and God forbid the US and Washington DC, these new historical paths for Commonwealth nations would feel much more satisfactory. Then there's a new autonomy system which, to be frank, is a forgettable feature. Being a colony like the Raj or Dominion like Canada or Australia, you still encounter the same issues as with the previous features. Being a puppet or diplomatically annexed is something to avoid, but being independent or quasi-independent is also not that much of an improvement to being subservient. At least as a dependency, you don't have to fight the United Kingdom or the United States. More historical and random events concerning the puppet-master relationship would also have been nice, as even though the expansion advertises new events, I hardly noticed anything that appeared to me as brand new. You are now allowed to ask for LEND-LEASE, but again, this feature is forgettable and of limited utility, specifically because the AI is prone to build hundreds and hundreds of understrength and under-equipped divisions and is likely to have few reserves of equipment or equipment that is worth using. When it comes to requesting aircraft, this issue is less present thanks to Britain's massive aircraft reserve, but as most Commonwealth nations have small and underdeveloped air bases, there's no room for large amounts of planes, not to mention that they would be of limited utility in far-off and isolated theaters like Africa or Asia. The Spearhead Battle Plan Command is actually a great feature, and assigning panzers to steamroll and encircle hundreds of Soviet, Polish, and French divisions is now easier than ever. However, for nations without large reserves of manpower or industry and no motorized armor or mechanized units, the Spearhead Command is, again, of limited utility. The technology sharing feature is a small but nice addition to the game. For every tech that you don't have but your Commonwealth partners do, you get a tech discount. This feature is particularly helpful to nations with limited research slots like the British Raj. However, the utility of this feature goes out the window if you are considering independence or turning against the British, and depending on your dependency status, it's a questionable incentive to stay within the Commonwealth. Colonies and puppets receive basically no technology sharing bonus, whilst dominions receive the most. And finally, the last big feature of the expansion is a combat log, which allows you to review the outcomes of battles and evaluate practically everything you would want to know about a battle. Who was in charge, who died and how many, the terrain, attrition, and equipment used, etc. It's a fantastic and well-appreciated addition to the game, and it feels kind of crazy that this feature wasn't included in Hearts of Iron IV already. Note that this feature is actually part of the free 1.3 Torch patch that accompanies Hearts of Iron IV Together for Victory, but 2 more tabs, noting the loss of equipment and effectiveness of your division templates, is restricted to those who have paid for the DLC. Interestingly, the combat log is not affected by your encryption or decryption and gives you perfect information and summaries of battles, a curious characteristic considering the strength and industry of other nations is affected by encryption and decryption. Before we wrap up this review, I want to touch on a variety of aspects that accompany the expansion. First, the graphics. The new unit models for infantry, aircraft, and vehicles are spot on and very high quality. I was astounded to see Indian troops roll into Tibet with Gurkha hats, and if I saw the British and Gurkhas fighting against each other during my time with the expansion, I probably would have crapped myself by how cool that would look. There are also new interface graphics for the Commonwealth countries to simulate you unlocking a Mark V World War I era tank or Vickers or Bofors AT gun or Sten submachine gun, and the graphics look crisp, clean, and nice, small additions as they may be. Another addition is the COSMETIC tags, or in other words, the naming system of Victoria II, EU3, and EU4 for areas like colonies, protectorates, and exclaves. It was nice seeing a Dutch East Indies or British Malaya, but the lack of a Belgian Congo, British Egypt, French Indochina, or British East Africa is difficult to swallow, and this system could very much have been expanded upon to really spice up the flavor and immersion. I would have loved to see a German Britain, Canadian Mexico, or an Italian Africa. Next up, sound. As always, Andreas Waldetoft is excellent with his new music, and the addition of a music player might be pivotal to some who hear the same music tracks play over and over again. I personally don't pay too much attention to the music, and that might be because while it's good, it's not breathtaking, or that I am so engrossed into the game I just don't notice. Take your pick. Let's talk about performance. I'll be candid, there seems to be a problem with performance in this patch and expansion compared to previous iterations of the game. Running on an i7 6800K 6-core processor at 4 GHz and a GTX 1070 graphics card, I don't think I should have a problem running the game at lightning speeds. However, by 1941 I began to experience a marked slowdown, with Speed 4 feeling faster than Speed 5, and even in 1936, Speed 5 felt surprisingly jittery. While I was looking for a buttery smooth gameplay experience, in the end, it felt more like the butter was chunky and at room temperature. It's not perfect, but it'll do. I imagine speeds 2 to 3, while painfully too slow for me, will run just fine for most modern CPUs. Lastly, the AI. The computer component we all know and love seems to have taken some steps forward, but on the way he fell down a flight of stairs and broke an ankle. The AI doesn't seem to have improved in competency. As much as it is doing more, it still doesn't feel like enough. I saw Japan conquer some of East Asia and Australia for the first time, and Germany and Italy finally focus on Europe first and Africa second, but I still did not see a historical Operation Barbarossa, and Italy several times was occupied by the Allies by 1940. China fell by 1939, and the AI still seems to train hundreds of understrength and under-equipped divisions. In addition, Germany still suffers with Norway. A puppeted fascist China could not hold its own against French Indochina, and the Dutch East Indies and British Malaya were not once invaded by a Japan that was unencumbered by the United States. In fact, even Japan's invasions of Australia and New Zealand seemed like impulsive and opportunistic operations rather than strategic, carefully planned maneuvers. The AI is lacking in Hearts of Iron 4, and sadly, Together for Victory fails to improve it a great amount. So, the big question, is Together for Victory worth buying? If I had to choose between an instant buy, wait for a sale, or avoid, I would definitely wait for a deep sell for this expansion. The expansion is good, and there is good effort here, as well as substance, but as an expansion, I must review the content in its context and environment, and frankly, Hearts of Iron 4 still seems like a war game that lacks depth and substance, something that Together for Victory cannot make up for on its own. Is the game headed in the right direction? Sure, but for $14.99 US, a purchase of this expansion would leave consumers disappointed and wanting more. Better to wait for the time being, or until hotfixes and patches fix the core game.